Hello and welcome to Media Dialogues with Storyboard 18. I am Delshad Irani and today I'm in conversation with Mark Abraham, who's the Managing Director and Senior Partner at BCG. Mark is also BCG's Global Personalization Leader. I'm also joined by Aarav Singhal, who's the Managing Director and Partner at BCG as well. Mark and Aarav are here with me to talk about personalization. Can we finally realize the promise of hyper-personalization at scale in an AI-powered age? We'll also figure out what is the next evolution in personalization. So on that note, hello and welcome to Media Dialogues with Storyboard 18. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you both with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Mark, of course, you are the global personalization leader for BCG. You wrote about, the $2 trillion opportunity that is personalization in your book. If you could perhaps just give me a little bit of an insight on some of the key unlocks there that you've listed in your book, without, of course, giving away too much. What you mentioned there, which is, realizing the 5 promises of personalization.
Yes.
Just a little bit of context here. What is that?
Well, let's even start with what personalization is, because it's such an overused buzzword, and we had to start with defining it in the book. And we defined it as taking what you learn about a customer in one interaction and making their next interaction better, faster, cheaper, more convenient. So it's really more than just putting a name in an email or giving you, if you bought this, then buy that recommendation. So I would say the how-to guide, the 5 promises that you have to deliver on if you want to do personalization well, starts with why are you personalizing that experience for the customer? What I call empower me. So are you trying to make the purchase easier and more convenient? Or are you trying to maybe just even help me navigate? For example, if I'm on a financial services journey, the goals I have, and understand those goals and help me navigate to the next choices I have. It's not just about selling products. There's a lot that customers are trying to figure out in that journey. In a lot of ways, personalization can be applied. So let's start there. Let's understand the customer.
So Aarav, let me ask you this, right? Where are the gaps right now? Where are you seeing, we were talking about how do you sort of define personalization, what does it mean to a lot of businesses? Give me a sense of where the challenges lie for a lot of businesses today.
See, there's 2-3 parts to it, right? If you think of the hard stuff and the soft stuff. In the hard stuff, just the technical stack which is available. When we surveyed our clients, about 65% of the clients believe they don't have that stack in place to be able to personalize. What does that mean? You need to be able to send out a lot of offers, a lot of communication. You need to be able to measure feedback and plug it back into your analytics to be able to say what to next, right? Because we are trying to identify what's a good action for the customer. So that's one big issue. The second issue is to be able to communicate differently and to a lot of people. You need a lot of creatives. We are not only communicating in words, but also in pictures. So while Gen AI is an unlock, not everybody has been able to tap into Gen AI yet. And hence scaling up that personalization outbound engine, that's the other constraint. So that's the hard stuff, like the physical one. The soft stuff is how do you rally the organization to work together. Personalization is one of those things which is highly cross-functional. You have a business objective which the business is driving. You need the analytics team to support it and be able to generate the insights and segment the customers at a level of 1. You need the tech function to come in to create all of this technology to run the show. And all of them have to work together in a very intricate manner. That's the biggest challenge clients are identifying, that how do you make that come together with the right incentives, right processes. So these are the 3 I would say.
Yeah, personalization is first and foremost a people problem, despite all the
technology,
talk about technology
absolutely.
and data. And it starts with even having a clear vision and a leader who can hold the organization accountable to that vision.
So coming to the crux of the conversation, which is marketing in this AI-powered age, and how maybe that we can finally maybe realize the promise of personalization. Why is it so hard, perhaps, or challenging for leaders to identify where to invest, how to invest, what to invest in? So just what is your sense, given your global perspective?
And it's been interesting because I think one of the issues in personalization has been a lack of a clear way to measure it. So in the book and in our work at BCG, we've put in place this thing we call the Personalization Index. And we surveyed hundreds of companies around the world on how they're doing personalization with AI and Gen AI. And we found that only 10% of companies are really classified as personalization leaders. So 90% of companies are not really unlocking the full potential of personalization. And I think even more so than the tools, because many of them have started experimenting with Gen AI tools in their creative content or in their call centers, it comes back to this point around process and people. We find, for example, in content development, you can create text and images and translate copy very quickly with these Gen AI tools, but often the approval processes, the handoffs, those are what break the process. When, for example, for a bank, we mapped a typical campaign process takes 16 weeks because 80 people touch it, there's 15 handoffs between the agency and the internal teams. And so you can put all the Gen AI you want into that process. If you don't streamline the process itself, you won't get the scalability of it.
Just to add, like I kind of think of it as creativity at scale, right? The tool can scale up your creativity. You can give it all the guardrails, you can give it all the brand guidelines, everything. But if the internal process doesn't scale in the same manner at the same speed, then the system doesn't work, right? And that's what Mark is alluding to, that these have to go together and scale up, and that's not an easy problem.
So what is holding back putting those streamlined measures in place to finally get that output from the tech? Because, how do you get from tactics to tangibles in that sense?
I always encourage my clients to get a small team together. I think one of the core issues is it becomes a giant team of 40 people trying to solve the problem instead of breaking down the problem to, for example, let's take this brand, let's take these channels, let's take this geography and just solve content with Gen AI, for example, in a much more streamlined way with 6 people. Now you can have the marketer and the creative and the analytic folks and the tech folks working together at a table, solving the issue with tangible outcomes and goals in a finite period of time, let's say 2 months, and getting to concrete outcomes. I think that's what it takes to really re-engineer the processes, because the devil's in the details. And you have to have the doers, not the C-suite leaders trying to solve it.
Yeah. I think just to add, in many of the creative elements, the starting point, at least in Indian clients, is that most of the work was outsourced. So you have different partners who are doing the creative process for you. And the internal capability is more of quality checking and giving some brief in the beginning, not so much of doing the work themselves.
Yeah.
That's what Mark is saying, that you need to create that pod of people who's a small pod, but they can do all the activities in-house. Potentially once always get the external partners also to be part of the pod to start with, and then gradually in-house the processes. That is really where the needle will move in terms of really getting the value out of this.
Yeah, and I think organizations that enable their team members to experiment with the tools get much further, much faster. For example, a tech client of mine in the US, they enabled every marketer to prompt engineer their own copilot for building campaigns, writing copy, so that copilot has their style, their work content in mind, and it's allowed them to scale up their productivity by 2x without adding more people. And those folks love it. They now know what Gen AI can do for them, and they want more.
Just one add to it, I think there's also a bit of a hesitation with the really senior leaders.
Why is that?
Yeah, so I'll come to that, right? If I look at the spectrum of tenure and savviness with new technologies, the relatively younger folks are more savvy, but they are not the decision makers. The relatively senior folks are less savvy. They also have less time to kind of absorb it and learn it.
Right.
And they are the decision makers. With privacy, with legal considerations, they are more risk averse to trying to experiment, especially in customer facing opportunities,
Yes.
right? So the places where we've been able to do, and in fact we've been able to do this at a bank, which is like more regulated and more prone to any issue being more severely dealt with. There the leaders have really immersed themselves and gotten into the detail. They've developed comfort, and there's a lot of experimentation and scale up which is happening on Gen AI. So that's the other element of how do you bring the leaders at a level where they understand it deeply and get comfortable so that they can let go and say, okay, go ahead, experiment and build something out. And that's the element required.
And this is interesting. You mentioned the banking sector as an example. Is this more of an Indian development, or are you seeing this across the globe as a sector? It is perhaps more at the forefront of experimentation.
In the last 5 years, what has happened though is in every sector, including in healthcare, financial services, B2B, the more regulated industries, we now have personalization leaders. And these companies are really trying to break down silos across channels and BUs to unlock personalization. But it's been a development over the last 5 years. I think India has also leapfrogged in a lot of ways, right?
I think in India there's a couple of things which give advantages to the banking sector in specific, right? A lot of our transactions are all digital. We have a really strong digital stack which is available. And Indian consumers, we also again surveyed that 96% of consumers are willing to give data to get value in return. So it's a combination of customers being open and tech being available to really tap into and actually collect a lot of rich data, which then feeds back, and we are able to create offers and measure the performance and really start personalizing offers at an individual level. So I think that's a good enabler which plays out in terms of just the basic infrastructure being solid.
And we have that scale.
We have the scale for sure.
We have that scale, so it's kind of like a large scale experiment playing out right in front of us. But it's so that with Gen AI, especially the conversations that I have been having, it's a lot more to do with creative, as you mentioned. We're talking about content creation in that space, but personalization, of course, is so much more than that.
Absolutely.
What is the next stage of evolution? We're talking about agentic AI. Tell me a little bit about what should we be looking forward to? What do we need to keep our eye on as consumers, as marketers out there, just sort of grappling with this overwhelming amount of data and technology and everything we can do with it? So
there are two shifts that need to happen. First, with all this Gen AI content now that we're going to have and already have, we need to pair it with AI. So we need to really understand and curate which customers need to see what content and only show them what is relevant. I call this the less is more approach. So we've surveyed hundreds of CMOs around the world, and 70% of them are experimenting and even scaling certain instances of Gen AI, but they're not yet pairing it with the AI algorithms to really personalize that experience. So that's kind of shift number one that needs to happen, and 10 to 20% of companies are already there. I think the next evolution, though, will be even more interesting because we can move from push personalization, just always communicating with outreach to customers.
Annoying them in the bargain.
Exactly. Bombarding them with spam, right?
Yes.
And hopefully with AI, you can limit that, but still, I think where we need to move to is pull personalization. And this is where agentic AI really comes in, because you're going to have personalized virtual assistants that really solve end-to-end problems for you. You already see the start of that. For example, L'Oreal Beauty Genius can curate, if you have an occasion you're going to, what products should you buy, or Expedia is an online travel agency, and they give you ideas for your next trip. But I think this is still too limited. We need whole ecosystems of solutions. For example, if I'm going on a travel journey, I don't just want Expedia's recommendations. I really want to take all the friction out of that journey. And you're seeing the start of this with what Delta, for example, announced with Delta Concierge, where they're partnering with Uber and Joby, which is a flying rideshare app, and YouTube, which is providing content for what you can see on the screens. That's really taking the friction out of that travel experience and making it more joyful. So that's where we're going to move to experiences like Delta Concierge, taking all the friction out of your travel experience.
Full personalization.
Yes, so you can interact with it when and where you need it. I've lost my bag, I've missed my connection, what do I do? And it's already anticipating that need and helping you navigate it.
Aarav, how far are we from that ideal personalization situation in India, for instance, given that you have a deeper understanding of the market as well? Where are we? What stage are we at? What are some of the other, like Mark mentioned Delta as a use case. Are there such examples that we're seeing here?
Yeah. So one, I think the tech has evolved quite rapidly. So I don't think the tech now is the constraint in making this happen. So that's a good part, right? Many conversations are already happening. Many experiments are live in being able to use agentic AI for narrow use cases at this point in time, to be able to demonstrate that this can work and this can have value, right? The agentic AI in a way breaks your cost, reach and quality trade-off. Because at low cost, you can reach everybody and give good quality to everybody. So that also justifies the business case of wanting to do it. In terms of the evolution, I think the first step where we are seeing it is more on internal customer facing processes. So if you have a large sales team, how is that team engaging with the rest of the systems internally and processes so that the automation is done and at the same time it's not exposed to customers so that it can get fine tuned. But moving from there to the customer facing one, not too far out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 2025 is the year when we scale a lot of the marketer-focused use cases, and hopefully in a year or so, we'll see a lot more on the customer-facing front.
We briefly spoke about consumers, users being a lot more willing to share their data for that value. Now, of course, different markets are at different stages of the regulatory evolution.
Yes.
And with AI in the mix, those conversations are far more complicated, far more complex now. Tell me a little bit about the sort of the regulatory scenario and how will that play out in this kind of trade-off. I'm giving you my data, where's my privacy? What is going to happen?
There is a move towards more privacy, but it comes along with the data security as a assurance layer. So as long as
hygiene.
Yeah, hygiene, and as long as I take consent, then I can use your data. So I need to build in where and how I'm taking consent. That's point one. But after that, being able to manage the data, that's where if you solve it right, there is no issue at all, right? You have to mask the data, you have to have encryption. You cannot share personal data without tokenizing it so that the other parties or even the cloud knows what sort of data you are sharing. So I think the technological guardrails around how do you manage the data, they can counterbalance all the privacy concerns or the direction we are moving, with the critical unlock being consent from the customer. And that's where Indians have a higher propensity at this point to give consent, because they see a lot of value from what they can get in trade-off for the data. Probably Mark, you can give a...
and we see that globally too. When the exchange of value is clear, then the willingness to share data globally as well goes up from 30 to 90% of consumers willing to share that personally identifiable data. But you have to be clear on what that is and get consent. I think there are two additional considerations. One is transparency. So I do think brands are innovating with ways to show customers easily what data they have about them. In my book, for example, I talk about Marriott, where you can go into the Bonvoy app and you can see what all the data it is that they have about you. I think brands are moving to this more transparent approach.
Have your privacy profile right there.
Exactly. Then you feel comfort. LinkedIn, for example, allows you to download your data. But I think the other piece is on the AI front. And this is where responsible AI comes into play. And companies need to really embed this culture of really thinking through the second order implications of the algorithms they're running. For example, we do a lot of work in personalized offers. And Of course, you never want to tailor demographic information as an input into these algorithms, but you also have to check on the other end, are there unintended consequences? Like, did we give less rich offers to lower income segments? And if you don't put in some of those checks and balances, you may have algorithms producing outcomes you don't want as a brand. So it's really critical to design those guardrails up front.
We, of course, talk about generative AI and artificial intelligence. Why not talk a little bit more about maybe augmented intelligence?
I still feel India has a lot of brick and mortar. India has a lot of efficiency gains to still realize. And in that case, many of the AI, Gen AI enablements are likely to work, at least in the near future, in a more what we call co-pilot mode. They are helping the front line, they are helping the person do their tasks more efficiently and be able to serve many more clients, right? So that their ability to do well increases. And that's where the focus currently, at least in many of the places where we are doing the work, is. And how do you do more? So for example, if I tie it back to personalization, the same marketing team can make many more offers which they weren't doing. It's not that they were already making offers and we need to scale down the team. So there's still efficiency gains and scale gains which are the predominant priority. And the part around reducing headcounts and all, not so relevant at this stage in time, at least where I'm seeing it from an Indian context.
I'm an optimist as well on this one, even despite all the pessimism that's out there. I think we have a huge opportunity to take out the toil and increase the joy in the work. And that's what I'm seeing from many of my clients. They're increasing the volume of content by 10x and doing things from a creative standpoint that they would never have had the time to do because they were so busy just pulling the customer lists and handing it over to the agency and checking the work back. So there's a real opportunity to unlock creativity. I think in order to do that, though, it goes back to my point on we have to start with what does the customer want, and we have to re-engineer some of these processes. But there's huge opportunity to use AI for growth instead of just using it for efficiency if we pair it with the right human processes.
But right now, a lot of the chatter and the narratives around efficiencies.
Yes.
But we need to start talking about that.
And this is where I think if we can create these pull personalization opportunities and experiences for customers where the marketers are spending more of their time designing these experiences, strategizing on what they've learned from customers in those last interactions, and they're enabled by these tools that are telling them, synthesizing the insights, suggesting opportunities, they can really unlock a better customer experience. And as we look around, every category, whether it's in India or around the world, we research has so much opportunity to improve that experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. No one's going to say no to, being delighted and giving us the convenience as well. But thank you so much. It was absolutely a pleasure chatting with you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.